Jack Hudson didn't expect anything to change that day. He had hired another maid, not out of hope but exhaustion. He didn't ask for her credentials. He didn't care where she came from. He just needed someone, anyone, to be in the house while his daughter continued to wither away upstairs. For 12 weeks, 6-year-old Sophie had been disappearing. First her appetite, then her laughter, then her voice. All gone. She had watched her mother die, not heard about it. Watched it. From the hospital bed to the final breath, Sophie had seen everything, and something in her shut down that day. She stopped talking. She stopped eating. She stopped choosing to live. Jack had tried everything. Therapists, pediatricians, trauma specialists, world-class chefs preparing meals shaped like animals and stars. Nothing worked. His money could buy anything except the one thing his daughter needed most, a reason to stay. Then came the new maid, Rachel Davies, hired in a haze of sleepless nights and desperation. Jack barely remembered signing the paperwork. By the time she arrived, he didn't care what her qualifications were. He just needed to breathe. That afternoon, he stepped into the house expecting silence, the kind of silence that had become normal. Heavy, hollow, too loud to ignore, too empty to change. But the kitchen wasn't empty. Sophie was sitting at the counter, alive, upright, a spoon in her hand. Rachel sat across from her, quiet and calm, a plain bowl between them. Sophie raised the spoon, brought it to her lips, and took a bite. Jack froze. He didn't speak. Couldn't. For 3 weeks, his daughter had refused everything, ripped out IVs, spat out water, fought every attempt to nourish her. She was fading in front of him, but now she was eating, not being forced, not being begged, just eating. Sophie looked up at Rachel. Her voice was quiet, barely there. "I think she can taste it too," she whispered. Jack felt his knees go weak. He didn't know who this woman was. He didn't know what she'd said or done. But something had changed, something none of the experts could explain. And if you really want to understand how a child who had given up on life found her way back with a single spoonful of oatmeal, you have to go back to the morning Sophie tried to make pancakes for her mother's birthday, and everything broke. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story reminds you, kindness doesn't need credentials, just the courage to stay. She didn't look like herself anymore. Sophie's cheeks had hollowed out, her lips were cracked, her arms, once full of life and motion, now hung limp by her sides. She barely blinked. Rachel didn't say much. She just sat across from her, the bowl resting between them. No games, no baby talk. Just silence, soft and present. A spoon scraped gently. Nothing fancy. Just oatmeal, warmed with cinnamon and honey, the way Rachel's grandmother used to make it. Sophie stared at it, then at Rachel. Their eyes met. Rachel didn't rush, didn't push. She just held out the spoon and waited, like she had all the time in the world. And then, something in Sophie shifted, almost too small to notice. She leaned forward, opened her mouth, and let the spoon in. The moment passed quietly. No gasps, no music, just the sound of breathing, theirs and Jack's, barely audible from the doorway. Rachel smiled once. Not big, just enough. Sophie swallowed. Her throat moved like it hadn't in days. She held onto the edge of the counter, grounding herself, like her small body couldn't believe what it had just done. Rachel didn't praise her, didn't make it a moment. She simply offered another spoon. Sophie took that one too. Jack didn't move. He couldn't. His phone had slipped from his hand and landed face down on the floor. He barely noticed. His daughter, his little girl who had refused life, was eating. Tears blurred his vision. He didn't bother to wipe them. Sophie turned her head slightly and spoke again. Her voice was raspy, thin, but sure. "It tastes like Mommy." Rachel nodded, her voice steady. "It's supposed to." That was it. No miracle speech, no revelation. Just two people sitting in a kitchen, remembering someone they both missed in different ways. And for the first time in 12 weeks, Sophie didn't look empty. She looked here, present. Rachel gently set the spoon down and reached for Sophie's hand. Their fingers touched, and neither one pulled away. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. Something had begun. And this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. 3 weeks earlier, Sophie had tried to make pancakes. It was early, before the staff arrived, before Jack had even opened his eyes. The sun hadn't fully climbed over the skyline. The house was quiet. She pulled a chair up to the stove, dragging it across the tile floor. Her mother's old recipe card sat on the counter beside her, smudged from years of use. Sophie couldn't read all the words, but she remembered the steps. Crack the eggs, add the milk, whisk until it's light and happy. That's what her mom used to say. Happy batter makes happy pancakes. Sophie poured too much flour, dropped an eggshell into the bowl, and tried to fish it out with sticky fingers. Her eyes were already stinging before the pan even hit the burner. She wanted to make it perfect. She wanted to make it like her mother did. But the batter was lumpy, the pan smoked, and the pancakes burned. The smell reached Jack in his upstairs office. He ran down the stairs barefoot, still in his t-shirt, phone clutched in one hand. The moment he stepped into the kitchen, he froze. Sophie was crying. Her hands were shaking, the front of her pajamas stained with flour. One pancake lay blackened in the pan, curling at the edges like it had given up. "I ruined it," she sobbed. "She always made them perfect." Jack crossed the room, his voice stuck somewhere in his chest. Sophie looked up at him with a grief far too old for her little face. "If I were better, she wouldn't have died." Jack knelt down, but she pulled away. "I can't do anything right," she whispered. "I can't even make pancakes." That was the last meal she tried to make. That was the last morning she spoke more than a few words. By nightfall, the silence had moved in. She didn't come to the table. She didn't ask for snacks. And when the staff brought her food, she didn't even look at it. The plate stayed full day after day. So did the ache in Jack's chest. By the end of that first week, Jack told himself it was temporary. Just grief. She'd eat when she was ready. By the second week, he wasn't sleeping. By the third, he wasn't pretending. He tried everything. Anymore. The nutritionist from Zurich, the trauma expert from Boston, a chef who once cooked for a royal family. They all walked through the front door with glossy resumes and soft voices. They all left the same way, empty-handed and shaken. Sophie didn't scream, she didn't resist. She simply didn't eat. She'd sit at the table with her head turned away, lips pressed together, eyes fixed on nothing. Sometimes she'd whisper, "I'm not hungry." Other times, she didn't speak at all. Jack begged. He held her hand in the dark and whispered promises he couldn't keep. He offered toys, trips, anything she wanted. She wanted nothing. At night, he stood outside her bedroom door, listening for movement. More often than not, there wasn't any. The doctors grew more concerned. IVs were ordered, feeding tubes discussed, eventually installed, then yanked out twice by Sophie herself. "She's not refusing food," one doctor told Jack quietly. "She's refusing life." Jack sat in his home office that night, staring at the city through glass walls. From up there, the world looked calm, controlled, predictable. But down the hall, in a pink bedroom filled with silence, his little girl was slipping away. And for the first time in his career, Jack Hudson, the man who could fix anything, had no plan, no answer, no idea what to do. He walked through his own house like a stranger. The walls felt colder, the lights too bright, the rooms too clean. Grief had stolen the center of everything, and money couldn't buy it back. One night he opened a job listing portal, hands shaking. He didn't know what he was looking for. He typed one line, "Housemaid, must be kind, must be good with children." He clicked submit, then closed the laptop, and cried for the first time since the funeral. Rachel Davies didn't know much about billionaires. She didn't grow up around white-gloved butlers or private chefs. She grew up in Atlanta, one bedroom, one grandmother, one grief that never really left. Her sister had died when Rachel was 10. Cancer, fast and merciless. One day they were playing with dolls on the porch. The next, Rachel was standing in a funeral dress that didn't fit, wondering why God had stopped listening. She stopped eating after that, not out of protest, out of something deeper. A feeling like food didn't belong in a world where her sister no longer lived. Her Nana tried everything, but nothing worked, until one quiet morning she sat beside Rachel with an empty bowl and a wooden spoon. "I'm making invisible soup," she said, stirring air like it was gold. "The kind that feeds your heart when your stomach can't handle anything else." Rachel didn't respond, at first, but the warmth in her grandmother's voice, the way she stirred with patience, not panic, the way she hummed as though someone was coming back, it broke something open. That invisible soup saved her. 2 decades later, Rachel saw the listing online, a maid position. Manhattan, private home. Must be kind, must be good with children. She didn't know what pulled her in. She wasn't a therapist, she wasn't a cook. She just cleaned houses and kept her head down. But something about the ad felt familiar. Rachel had felt that kind of desperation before, in her Nana's eyes, in her own reflection years ago, when she was starving and silent. So she packed one bag, pressed her uniform, and took the subway to an address that looked like it belonged in a magazine. When the door opened, no one smiled. The house was quiet, too quiet. Staff moved like shadows, no music, no laughter, no signs of a child. Just rooms full of silence, polished, perfect, empty. A woman in black walked her through the halls, gave clipped instructions, told her to clean, stay out of the way, don't expect conversation. Rachel nodded, but her eyes kept drifting upstairs. She could feel it. Grief had settled here like dust, and somewhere in that house a child was drowning in it. She didn't say it out loud, but in her heart she whispered, "I've been where she is. Let me try." The maid was supposed to start in the kitchen, dust the marble counters, wipe down the pantry shelves, organize the glass jars lined up like soldiers. But Rachel didn't move toward the kitchen. Something pulled her upstairs. Not noise, not a call. Just a quiet weight in the air, like a memory she hadn't lived yet. She walked softly down the hall, found the last door on the left. It was cracked open. A name stenciled on the outside in fading pink letters. Sophie's room. Inside the light was dim, curtains drawn, air still. Sophie lay curled on the bed, her face turned toward the wall. She looked smaller than 6, her arms too thin beneath the covers. The IV stand beside her was unplugged. Rachel didn't ask for permission. She stepped in quietly, sat on the floor beside the bed, and pulled something from her apron pocket. A spoon, old, worn, wooden, still warm from her own hand. She began to stir the air, slowly, rhythmically. No words, just the gentle motion like she was remembering something that mattered. Sophie stirred, barely. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. She stared at the woman on her floor, confused, silent. Rachel kept stirring, then hummed, soft and low. An old melody passed down from her Nana. It didn't have words, but it spoke anyway. Sophie blinked. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Rachel looked up, not surprised. "Making invisible soup," she said simply. "The kind that brings people back when they forget how to come home." Sophie didn't move. "That's stupid," she whispered. Rachel smiled. "It is." She kept stirring. Sophie watched. "I don't want soup," she said. "I know," Rachel answered. "But maybe your heart does." For a long time they sat like that. No force, no expectation. Just a woman stirring nothing, and a child watching everything. And when Rachel stood to leave, she didn't take the spoon with her. She left it on the windowsill right where the light touched it, just in case. The next morning Rachel came back. No tray, no food, just the same quiet presence. And a bowl. It wasn't filled with anything you could see, just warm water, steam rising like memory. She set it gently on Sophie's nightstand, then pulled the spoon from the windowsill. Sat on the edge of the bed like someone returning to a story. Sophie was already awake, eyes open, watching. Rachel stirred the water slowly. Sophie didn't speak at first, but she didn't turn away either. "What's in it?" she asked after a while. Rachel glanced at her. "You tell me." Sophie frowned. "You're the one making it." Rachel shook her head. "I'm just the hands. The soup only works when someone else remembers the recipe." Sophie stared at the bowl, her voice barely a breath. "My mum liked cinnamon." Rachel smiled. "Then we add that first." She stirred. Sophie sat up a little straighter. "Purple flowers. She always put them in the kitchen." Rachel added them in. Her favorite mug was blue. It had a chip on the handle. "Perfect," Rachel said. "Add the mug." They kept going, one memory at a time, not rushed, not forced, just placed gently into the bowl like ingredients that needed to be seen. Laughter, her mother's humming, Sunday pancakes, the way she kissed Sophie's forehead before school. Sophie didn't realize she was crying until her voice caught mid-sentence. Rachel didn't reach for her, she just kept stirring, like the tears were part of the recipe too. That night, Sophie asked if Rachel would come back in the morning. Rachel nodded. "Same time, same soup." Sophie smiled, just barely. "Yeah, but we forgot one thing." "What's that?" Her singing voice. It sounded like honey. Rachel looked down at the bowl, then back at Sophie. "Then let's make sure we remember it tomorrow." Jack stood outside the door, listening. He didn't go in, didn't interrupt. But for the first time in weeks he stayed. And the house, once cold and still, felt like it had exhaled. Just a little. Sophie hadn't been downstairs in almost a month. Not since the morning of the pancakes, not since everything burned. Her feet had forgotten the rhythm of the staircase. Her legs trembled just standing beside the bed. But Rachel didn't carry her. She stood by the door, spoon in her apron pocket, waiting. "The kitchen's still there," she said gently, "but this soup doesn't cook itself." Sophie looked uncertain. "What if I get tired?" "Then we rest," Rachel said, "but we walk." Sophie slid off the bed slowly. Her knees wobbled. Rachel didn't move to catch her. She just held out her hand. One step, then another. They reached the hallway. Sophie stopped at the top of the stairs. "It's far." "I know." "I might fall." "You might." Rachel crouched to meet her eyes. "My nana used to say, healing doesn't ride in limousines. It walks, one step at a time." Sophie looked down the staircase, then lifted her foot. The first step creaked. "I'll name something I miss," Rachel said. "Every time you take a step, you do the same." Sophie nodded. "Okay. You go first." "Fresh peaches on a hot morning," Rachel said. Sophie took a shaky step. "My mum's hands in my hair." My sister's laugh through the screen door. "My mum's perfume, it smelled like sugar." They kept going, not fast but steady, a rhythm born of remembrance. By the time they reached the bottom, Sophie was breathless, but standing. Jack watched from the hallway, out of sight. Tears ran silently down his face. He had carried Sophie to the hospital, carried her when she fainted in the hallway, carried her when she stopped speaking. But he had never seen her walk like this, choosing each step, bringing her mother with her. Rachel opened the kitchen door. "Welcome back," she whispered. The room was warm, light touched the countertop, the same bowl sat waiting. But this time, Sophie didn't sit to be fed. She reached for the drawer, found a spoon and said, "I want to help." Rachel smiled. "You already are." The kitchen didn't look different. Same marble counters, same spotless floor, same lemon on the windowsill, untouched for days. But something had changed. Sophie stood barefoot beside the island, a little unsteady but upright. Rachel rolled up her sleeves, set a pot on the stove, then looked at Sophie. "You ready?" Sophie nodded. They started with carrots. Sophie peeled slowly, unevenly. The shavings curled like ribbons across the counter. "Say thank you to each one," Rachel said. Sophie looked up. Why? Because they made it here, and so did you. Sophie whispered, "Thank you," to the next carrot. Then the potatoes. Salt, onions, bay leaf. One by one, each added with care, not just motion. Jack hovered at the edge of the room, not stepping in, not interrupting. Rachel handed him a knife. "You're part of this too." He blinked. "I haven't cooked anything in 20 years. "Good," Rachel said. "That means you haven't learned how to ruin it yet." He took the knife, chopped clumsily. Sophie giggled, just once, but it echoed. Then came Rachel's voice, low and sure. "Before it simmers, everyone adds an invisible ingredient." Sophie leaned in. "Like the soup upstairs?" Rachel nodded. "Exactly." Sophie closed her eyes. "Forgiveness," she said, "for thinking it was my fault." Jack swallowed hard. He stirred. "Presence," he said, "for all the days I wasn't." Rachel looked at the pot, then at them. "Grace," she whispered, "because healing doesn't happen in straight lines." The soup simmered quietly. No rush, no pressure, just warmth filling the room like light through a cracked door. They sat at the table. Sophie lifted her spoon. "This time," she said softly, "I want to taste it with both of you." They ate together, spoonful by spoonful. Not fast, not heavy, just enough. And though no one said the word, they all felt it. This wasn't a meal, it was a return. 3 months later, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon again. Not silence, not sterile lemon polish. Cinnamon, butter, coffee, laughter. The morning light looked softer now, or maybe it was the way Sophie stood in it, hair tied back, stirring batter in a bowl twice her size. Rachel stood beside her, guiding gently, not leading. "Too much flour," she warned. Sophie grinned. "It's a pancake, not a cloud." Jack worked from the breakfast nook now, laptop open, tie undone, phone on, silent. He said it was for convenience, but really, he just didn't want to miss anything. The house no longer echoed. It breathed. Staff smiled when they passed each other in the halls. The air didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt lived in. Rachel had never been called the maid again, not after that day. Now, Sophie called her Miss Rachel with affection. There was a small corkboard in the kitchen next to the fridge. Sophie had started pinning up drawings, crooked hearts, bowls of soup, stick figures holding hands. One day, she brought out the wooden spoon, held it like something sacred. "The nanny's little boy lost his dog," she said. Rachel nodded. "That kind of pain sits in your throat." Sophie placed the spoon in a clean jar beside the stove. "He might need the soup." Rachel didn't speak, just reached out, cupped Sophie's cheek and smiled. Later that night, Jack stood in the kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed. He turned off the lights, but didn't leave. The silence wasn't haunting anymore. It was gentle, full. A piece of paper fluttered on the fridge, held up by a strawberry magnet. Sophie's handwriting, crooked and full of heart. "The best meals are made with love you can't see. Thank you, Miss Rachel, for feeding my heart."